Good morning, everyone. We're thankful that you guys are online with us for today's webinar called COVID Cleanup, a panel discussion with Choice Partners and Buckeye International. You guys are in for a great treat today with the discussion that we have today. I'm going to give you a few housekeeping rules. My name is Stephanie De Los Santos. I'm the Director for Client Engagement at Harris County Department of Education. Just wanted to give you a few things to remember during this webinar. This is a topic discussion is set to conclude at 11 a.m., but we will follow it with a question and answer session. So if you'd like to stay on, we'd love for you to join us for question and answers. During the entire webinar, feel free to submit questions under the chat button or the question button. And we will be fielding those questions, and those will be questions that will be answered at the end of the webinar. Today's broadcast is being recorded and it will be posted at www.choicepartners.org. All attendees will be in listen-only mode. So the only discussion that you'll hear will be our panelists, which will be introduced by Jeff Drury, who is our Director for Choice Partners. Last thing to remember is that you can receive CEU credit. It will be offered, but you have to be sure to stay on till the very end. And at the end, you will receive a link that will take you to a survey. And within the survey, you can request that CEU credit. Again, thank you for joining us today. With that, I'm going to pass this on to Jeff Drury.
Hello, good morning. This is Jeff Drury with Choice Partners. I'm the Director of Choice Partners. Have been for the past 5 years. You may have, thank you, Stephanie. You may have heard Stephanie mention she's the Director of Client Engagement for HCDE, Harris County Department of Education. For those of you that know us and know HCDE, there's no explanation, but I know we have people from around the state of Texas and other states also attending. So I'll give you a little quick background of who Choice Partners is and who HCDE is. At one time, the state of Texas with 254 counties had 254 departments of education, one for each county. They were the precursor to what we call the ISDs in Texas now, the independent school districts, of which there are probably between 1,200 to 1,400, I believe. There is one county school district left, County Department of Education left. That's us, HCDE. All of us folks that work at Choice Partners, we have 17 full-time employees with Choice, in addition to contract field reps out there making calls on members and working with vendors. We are all government employees, just like I would imagine most of our folks here are. There may be some not-for-profit, whether you're a city, county, university, school district, K through 12, things like that. Choice Partners has been in, or HCDE/Choice Partners has been in existence for probably 40 plus years in some form or fashion, whether it was what's called a supply catalog, Gulf Coast Food Co-op, or whatever in the past. We're comprised of 3 main divisions, and we've got what we call the commodities, which Buckeye is with, or we sell a lot of their products. They're on the panel with us today. A lot of the cleaning and custodial products, and then office supplies, computer supplies, all those fall under the commodity side. We've also got the construction as a second leg, which works with all the job contractors, whether there's a full general contractor or the trade jobs. And then the third is the food, of which Buckeye actually goes through both sides. They have some food contracts and some standard contracts with commodities. Our food is very robust. Last count, and I know it's been up way quite a few numbers since then, but we would like to make the claim that whether we're selling, chicken nuggets or a piece of equipment, our food contracts touch about 113 million meals a year for students, or for at a university, at an ISD, or wherever, some of the prison systems, things like that. So, and I know it's well exceeded that. That was just a calculation from a couple of years ago. Now let's get to the agenda. And the agenda is great. I don't know if any of you watch Family Feud and Steve Harvey, but he always says, we got a good one for you today. Well, I think we got a good one for you today. We've got a moderator and 3 panelists. The moderator is well, I'll go through the introductions in just a second. Really, the topics that we're going to be covering, as you can see, are the best practices and safety measures, hand hygiene, and reopening support tools. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, we're going to have the following slides are going to be 1 each on the moderator and then 3 panelists. And I'm going to ask each one as we start going with them to start sharing their screen, or I guess put their face up on the camera. So here before long, you'll have 4 new faces up here, and I will go back into oblivion, and we'll get to the meat of the presentation. First person, Stephen Kendrick. He's worked for Choice Partners before. He's an HCDE guy. He's a senior manager, facilities planning. I could read all this stuff, but he's been 15 years of experience, procurement, government, education, private markets. He is a tremendous tool working, having worked for us in the past, working with us very closely now, understands all sides of the spectrum from purchasing cooperatives, from being in the leadership management role at a school district, understanding a lot of these custodial issues, understanding a lot of the construction issues that are out there. He wears a lot of different hats. He's extremely knowledgeable on a lot of the laws, statutes, guidelines, things like that are out there, and a tremendous resource for us. So, and I'll start going with these, the Buckeye folks. First one will be Scott Criswell. And I think Scott probably populate here pretty soon. And Scott is the president of the Symmetry Hand Hygiene with Buckeye. It's 25 years of sales management experience at Buckeye. He's worked with healthcare, education, retail, community markets, just all the various markets, implementing facility maintenance programs. Since 2008, as the president of Symmetry, his main area has been implementing hand hygiene programs across those same markets. A lot of these Buckeye guys, I always like to put these analogies in, but they were sanitary and hand sanitizing and all that when it wasn't cool, kind of like that Dolly Parton song, you know, it was country when country wasn't cool. These guys have been talking about this, living, breathing, researching, and shouting from the highest mountain about a lot of the things that are highly important to us right now in this pandemic and COVID. So they're extreme experts in this area, and I think they're going to have a lot of great input. So Scott, you got all the kudos. Now we're going to continue introducing the other folks. So the next panelist from Buckeye, Scott Magg, Director of Research, dual major in chemistry and biology. That says enough right there. But 28 years of the product research, formulation, management experience, cleaning and maintenance products. He's currently the Vice President of Operations and Director of Research and Development at Buckeye International. I have toured the labs in some of those areas in St. Louis at the headquarters. It's a massive research lab. They're always on the cutting edge, trying to find out what works, what doesn't work, and what is the best product for you folks to be used in your facilities. So it's a great facility there. The third panelist, this will be the last one to come on. I'll drop off in just a minute. Troy Payment, Midwest Sales Director. Troy is a former captain in the U.S. Army, 17 years cleaning and maintenance industry experience with Buckeye as a sales rep, field sales manager, director of Buckeye Cleaning Centers, and currently the Midwest Sales Director. So Troy has been in the trenches. He's probably visited more facilities than most of us can name. He's worked with a lot of the Buckeye, like the VCC, Buckeye Cleaning Centers, the independent sales reps, all those type people across the country. I've personally traveled with Troy in other states. He knows his stuff like there's no tomorrow. I just go in and tell him a little bit about co-ops every now and then when I'm with him, but a wealth of knowledge also. So with that being said, y'all are probably tired of me. You're going to start listening to some experts and hopefully learn quite a bit. So Stephen, I'm going to let you take it from the next slide.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad that you could join us today for this presentation. So as you know, and I've said this more times than I care to count, but we are truly in unprecedented times. We have experienced something that we have never before experienced in our lifetime, and we're having to make critical decisions that impact the public and our patrons. And sometimes it's nice to get together and find out what's going on, hear it from the specialists, and even get that affirmation that the decisions we're making are truly the correct decisions. With that being said, CDC has issued some guidelines for May of 2020. The majority of them were focused on K through 12 and colleges and universities. However, they are best practices for all aspects of government, for our charter schools, for cities, counties, universities. And so we're going to talk about a lot of that today. I would like to start out, as schools plan for reopening, what are the main programs and products schools should implement that are in line with the CDC reopening recommendations? Guys, one of y'all want to take that?
Sure. I think that obviously the hand hygiene program is going to be a very important part of it. And then I think we need to look closely at the disinfecting procedures that are taking place in the facilities that are in question. The disinfectant needs to be. Oh.
I'm sorry, but before you proceed, people tend to use disinfectant and sanitizing synonymously. Could you possibly explain the differences in the two before we get deeper into disinfection?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, in the hand hygiene program, you'll talk about sanitizing your hands. In the world of facilities, many times we talk about sanitizing hard surfaces, and we talk about disinfecting hard surfaces. So a sanitizer, while it does an excellent job of killing bacteria or viruses, depending on the kill claims that the product has, generally only gets you about 99% of the kill that you will receive from using the product at the correct dilution. A disinfectant, however, while you will never see 100% kill claim, you will see 99.9999% reduction of a particular bacteria or virus on the surface. So while they both perform similar duties, the disinfectant is just a much higher level of kill claims that take place.
Wonderful, thank you. So the first section that we're going to cover is best practices and safety measures. And when I ask these questions, I want you to consider it from two perspectives. The first one being just traditional cleaning using traditional methods. And then, as you know, we've also seen a surge in these foggers and misting systems being used. And so I'd like you to cover that aspect as well. When I go out and I walk facilities and I find why certain things are being done and I start asking questions, I typically get the answer, well, that's the way we've always done it, or it was like that when I got here. I get it's not right, but it's normal for us. And traditionally, we have focused on like square foot of cleaning per custodian, or lowering our cleaning levels to clean more square feet due to budget constraints or personnel constraints. But during this time, those excuses, that way of thinking is not going to work to tackle COVID-19 and to keep our students, our staff safe. So with that is my first question. Is there particular criteria disinfectants must meet to be used for COVID-19?
Yes, the fact of the matter is that the EPA, when the when the EPA issued guidance on what's called an emerging viral pathogen, which is what the COVID-19 virus is. It's emerging because it's not something that we've seen in the population or seen in our world. So since you don't have that information available to you to test against it, there has to be a standard set up that gives guidance on what we believe would kill it. So as an emerging pathogen, a disinfectant has to be a product that not only kills envelope viruses, which is what the COVID-19 is, but it must also kill non-envelope viruses. Non-envelope viruses are much harder to kill than what enveloped are. And that's why the EPA says you have to have a solid approach to disinfecting against non-envelopes. And non-envelopes are things like the norovirus, things like adenovirus, hepatitis A. You know, those are viruses that are very difficult to kill. So the assumption is when the emerging pathogen comes forth, you'll be able to use that at least as good guidance. Now, as we've learned more about the SARS-CoV-2 virus, as we've moved on learning about it and researching it, we found that it's very similar to the human coronavirus, which many disinfectants have the human coronavirus on their label. And the EPA just recently issued guidance that said, yes, you don't only have to have the emerging pathogen standard, but if you have the human coronavirus on your label, you can be rest assured that we believe it's effective against the SARS-CoV-2. As we get further down the road here, you'll find more primary registrants. Those are the people that make the active ingredients that kill the viruses and bacteria. You'll find many products will eventually have the actual SARS-CoV-2 virus kill claim on the label. I don't believe we're there yet, but we're probably within a few weeks.
Okay, thank you. Question number 2 is, are these disinfectants readily available for our entities to use?
There are many disinfectants on the marketplace that are available. Now, that being said, the industry is seeing a tremendous usage of these products. So the active ingredients are becoming in much more demand, and therefore the supply is spread out across a much larger number of individuals, but they are still out there. The hospital grade disinfectants, those are the products that are going to come with a wide array of both non-enveloped and enveloped, and gram negative and gram positive. And those would be the type of disinfectants that would be my recommendation on the best thing to use in a facility.
Okay, thank you. Now, number 3, and I'd like to spend some time on number 3, and again, cover it from the traditional versus the misting side. But what are the proper cleaning and disinfecting procedures the CDC recommends for COVID-19? And how frequently should entities be cleaning and disinfecting?
Well, the EPA and the CDC would recommend at the very least a daily cleaning and disinfection. Now, in many programs, if we have the labor available and we have the situation in the building that we can handle it, many times twice a day, I think would be a better choice. But I recognize that as we go forward, we have to look at how we're going to spend the custodian's time in taking care of a facility. But if we can get it at least once a day, I think it's critical, especially in schools where you've got children, you've just got a lot of potential for surfaces to become contaminated.
Okay, and so when we talk about proper cleaning and disinfecting procedures, I see a lot of where you get the chemical and you mist the surface real fast and then you immediately wipe it down. Or now I see a lot of where they just walk into a room and just fog it and then walk away. Are those proper cleaning procedures? Are those CDC approved?
The CDC and the EPA would both suggest that one should pay attention to the disinfectant that you're using. The disinfectant, every disinfectant has a kill time associated with it. And a kill time simply means that we have to keep the surface wet long enough to make sure that the disinfectant has time to have the effect of killing the virus or the bacteria that we're after. You'll find many manufacturers of disinfectants will say you can kill let's say, human influenza virus in 1 minute. You can kill the COVID-2 virus in 5 minutes. Whatever that case, you have to pay attention to what those dwell times are being focused on. If your kill times for the whole label, for instance, if a good hospital grade disinfectant has 50 or 60 claims on the label, and the highest dwell time is 10 minutes, one needs to think about how long they're keeping that surface wet to make sure that it's disabling all the viruses and bacteria that you're aiming for. The idea of foggers and misters, and unfortunately, there have been a lot of organizations go out and spend a great deal of money on that type of hardware. The problem is, when it gets right down to it, the EPA has not approved any one of those misters or foggers to be used with a disinfectant. And they've recently come out because, as you mentioned, the popularity of these devices it's become very high. So the EPA felt like they should issue that in a statement, and therefore told the public that none of those devices are approved as use with disinfectant. The reason is that when a manufacturer sends a disinfectant off to be tested, there's a specific test method. And you could certainly do that if you have the machine. For instance, Clorox has a machine called Clorox 360. They registered that product with their machine, but that is the only one on the marketplace that has the EPA's approval.
Okay. And using these foggers, I've heard just through talk that there's actually a potential that the fogger could decrease the effectiveness of the disinfectant or even increase dwell times. Is there any truth to that?
Well, the problem with foggers is the fact that it atomizes the product. When we submit test data to the EPA, it's considered test data that has been used with a coarse spray. And that's the way the EPA has set up all of their acceptance of the test data. So a coarse spray is something, for instance, out of a trigger sprayer, or you can mop it, you can put it on with a rag, but it's got to be something that we can ensure that we are 100% coating out the surface and keeping it wet long enough to have the kill time. So an atomized product takes longer to reach the surface. We don't know if we're completely covering the surface, and because it's a small droplet, it evaporates much more quickly than a coarse droplet.
Thank you for that. Now, question number 4, and I know we touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to go a little more in depth with it. What is the appropriate dwell time for using disinfectants for COVID-19? And why are dwell times different depending on the product? And I'd also like to extend that to say, most products don't currently have COVID-19 listed. So which dwell time on the product should our members follow?
Well, the members can certainly, I believe, talk to the manufacturer of the disinfectant to probably get the best answer from disinfectant to disinfectant. But for instance, I'll take the Buckeye International line of disinfectants. We would then look at a non-envelope virus that is on our label. And a non-envelope virus, as we touched on earlier, is much harder to kill than an envelope virus. The SARS-CoV-2 virus is envelope, so we believe it should be relatively simple to deactivate. But that being said, the guidance from the EPA says you have to select a non-envelope virus that is very difficult to kill. In our case, we would pick adenovirus 7. So if it takes 10 minutes to kill adenovirus 7 on a label, one needs to make sure that they're leaving the dwell time long enough to ensure that they're disabling the whole label, the adenovirus included with the SARS-CoV-2 virus. As we talked about earlier, dwell times are important because if we don't give the disinfectant enough time to interact with the outer coating of a virus or a bacteria, then we're not going to deactivate the genetic material that's inside that virus or bacteria.
Thank you. So really, would I be correct in saying that for me in facilities, I would probably need to emphasize and reiterate proper training and dwell times, keeping the surface wet, to effectively disinfect an area, as opposed to the spray and wipe method that many are used to before. And I like to use the analogy cleaning for health instead of cleaning for good looks. The room can look pretty and it can smell really pretty, but nothing truly be disinfected because the chemical did not have enough time to truly work and kill the bacteria.
That's very true. There's no question. As we go forward, especially when we start bringing everybody back to work, we start bringing the kids back to school, understanding that the custodian's time is very important and it's very critical. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we give that custodian the time to take care of it and make sure that the disinfecting is taking place according to label directions, which includes the dwell time, which includes making sure that we've thoroughly wetted out the surface across whatever the piece or part is we're trying to disinfect.
Thank you. I know we touched on this a little bit as well, but I want to take a deeper dive. The question is, what are the kill claim protocols for using disinfectants for COVID-19? And what kill claims should I look for on disinfectant labels? So I know that COVID-19 is not on most labels. So what can I look for to find a good quality disinfectant that will work against it, or my best chance at working against it?
Well, I would pay attention to make sure that it's a hospital grade disinfectant. And I know the term hospital, you think, well, why do I need hospital grade for my school? But the fact of the matter is a hospital grade disinfectant is going to give you a very expansive list of viruses and bacteria. So if a person is looking at a label, they should look for things like the adenovirus, things like hepatitis A, things like the norovirus. Those are very difficult viruses to kill, and therefore you can be assured that you're going to be able to kill the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And as I mentioned, sometime down the road here, we will start to see the SARS-CoV-2 actual name show up on disinfectant labels. It just took a while for laboratories to get enough time to be able to grow the virus and to be able to test against it. So there are many manufacturers that are in that queue that will have that shortly down the road.
Sure. So would a fair question to ask my chemical supplier, my chemical rep, be, has this disinfectant been used in medical facilities, or to ensure that there are hospitals and others that are using this chemical, that it is that medical grade, hospital grade product?
Oh, I think it's a very valid question. There's no reason that you shouldn't be able to ask the manufacturer of a product what the typical use pattern is on a disinfectant that you're about to purchase to take care of your facility.
Wonderful. Is there any other questions you'd recommend our members asking when considering what products to use or which line to go with?
Well, I believe that it's very important to not just look at the product literature. It's very easy for anyone to go in on the EPA's website and put an EPA registration number in, and any hospital grade disinfectant should have the EPA number listed on the label. The EPA is a public domain organization that is there for the protection of the general public. So if you put that EPA number in, you can see everything that's on the master label. What you see on a box or on a bottle is generally material that the manufacturer thought was important in the idea of selling it. But what the EPA master label says is all the information that a general public might look for in selecting a product.
Okay, thank you for that. Now I'd like to move on. So which high-touch objects and surfaces in facilities should we be disinfecting frequently?
Well, certainly you can start by going to the CDC website. They've got a list of high-touch surfaces. But if we walk through a facility, it doesn't take very long to see those spots that become the most high touch. You know, the doorknobs, the doors, student desks, chairs that people sit in all the time regularly, the cafeteria, the lunchroom, whatever the case, whatever the type of facility you have, all of those tables and chairs become high touch. Of course, the restrooms should have been taken care of anyway, but they become a high touch, a much more high touch area at that point as well.
Okay, thank you. So, final question for this section. What considerations should be made when combining a disinfectant with equipment and processes for application of the product?
Well, if you look strictly at the guidelines, since the EPA does not approve of the use of foggers or those type of applications, one has to look at something that will deliver a coarse spray, whether it be a pump-up sprayer, whether it be a trigger sprayer, whether it be a mop or a rag. But we have to take a hospital-grade disinfectant at the proper dilution, and that's a critical piece that we really haven't touched on. If the disinfectant says that you need to use it at 2 ounces per gallon, that's the dilution. It's not one of those cases where a little more is better. Don't use 4 ounces, don't use 6 ounces, don't use it concentrated, but use it at the recommended level, because we've tested it at 2 ounces and we don't know if it works at 3 and we don't know if it works at 1, but it's a very critical piece. And then of course the dwell time has to be considered on whichever disinfectant you choose to use.
Sure. So to expand on that, we've all seen the glove test where, 1 or 2 clugs per bucket. I don't know very many custodians that walk around with a measuring cup, measuring out the chemical. What would you say is the best way to ensure that chemical is being mixed properly?
Well, the strongest way is to have a dilution system, which, some facilities can't tie up water supply, so it makes it harder and it requires manual dilution. But if you can find a proportioning system that works for your facility, it will automatically dilute out the disinfectant at the proper rate to make sure that it's always there. The other side to that is that keeps the end user away from the concentrate, because generally the proportioning systems are set up as what's termed a closed system. So therefore the end user really can't accidentally come in contact with the concentrate. And of course, the concentrates have more human health and safety problems associated with them than a diluted product that has a lot more water mixed with it. So both of those are critical. And from a purchasing standpoint, frankly, that you're receiving exactly the right quantity. So therefore, you're not wasting money by over diluting it.
Thank you. Now, as a wrap up, that's the end of my questions, but is there anything that I haven't hit on that you feel our members should know when it comes to best practices and safety measures when disinfecting? And this is open to all panelists. It doesn't just have to be Scott.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going, man, we covered it good or what? Go ahead.
There's one more piece that we can talk about, and it's a piece that's perhaps a little harder or a little more difficult to explain, but the fact that there are what's termed treated article antimicrobial actives out there, these are things that are antimicrobial that are put into whether it be plastics, floor finishes. We've all changed our child in a public setting where you've got the diaper changing table. When you see that and it says protected by Microban, there's an embedded article in that plastic that helps to eliminate antimicrobial activity over the course of time. So what that does is gives you a layer of protection between the time you can disinfect and the next time you can disinfect. We all know that once we disinfect, what immediately starts happening? We begin to see the surface become contaminated again. Bacteria, funguses, viruses are everywhere. And all an embedded material does, and an embedded antimicrobial material does, is help give you another layer of protection between one disinfection to the other. It's certainly not intended to take the place of cleaning and disinfection. It's just another layer of defense that a facility can have.
Sure. And with that, let me ask you, what are your thoughts or opinions around UV lighting for disinfection? You know, I see UVC, various types of lighting. I think I've seen 3 different technologies come out since COVID, where they have maybe a portable light that they scan the room with, or a tower in the middle of the room that runs for 30 minutes. Do y'all have much knowledge on that?
We've certainly worked with UV light manufacturers. We've used them ourselves in our research department. The problem that you have is the application technique. You know, your strength of the UV light has to be consistent. You basically have to cover every crevice of a facility. And if you look around any room that you're sitting in right now, there are a lot of pieces and parts that won't be covered by a dome of a UV light. And just the fact that you're really not removing anything that it may kill. And UV certainly has been around many years as a machine that can kill a virus or a bacteria. But what happens with that on the surface? It simply stays there. The active disinfection not only kills it, but removes it at the same time.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Anyone else have anything to add before I move on to the next section? No? Okay. I would just like to mention to our attendees, now that we're at the end of the disinfecting section, please use that chat box or that question box and submit any questions that you would like us to touch on or hit on at the end of this presentation. Okay, so now I'm going to move over to hand hygiene. As we know, that is one of the #1 recommended ways of staying safe and healthy during this time. And we know that there's multiple ways to do that, whether it be traditional washing with water and soap, hand sanitizers, both alcohol and non-alcohol products, as well as we're seeing a lot of new products being manufactured by distilleries and other third-party companies that really have not been manufacturing hand sanitizers. And so I'd kind of like to talk about the differences and the effectiveness of each and when each should be used properly. With that being said, my first question is, what hand hygiene products and procedures should schools and universities and cities, counties follow for COVID-19?
Yeah, great question. I think, first of all, for everybody that just listened to Scott Mag, I'll give you hope that normal people can do this stuff too. All right. So he covered a lot of information. It is kind of overwhelming sometimes when you think, man, how am I going to tackle this? So if you take some of that advice, I think you'll be better off. But in terms of what you just asked, Stephen, it's really a program approach. You'll see that screen grab right there from the CDC website. Everybody is so used to talking about hand sanitizer. You'd think that's the only product that is made on the planet right now. And so it's really a combination thereof. So you'll see step 1 always is going to be to wash your hands with some type of hand wash. You'll notice they don't require it to be an antimicrobial, and that's fine if you want to use that, but that's not a requirement. But that first step is really critical, because what a hand wash does is it allows you to remove the microorganism from your hands. So the benefit with a hand wash is that I'm loosening that transient bacteria, whatever that organism is, with that mechanical action of actually washing my hands, and that's generally recommended to be about 20 seconds. So that's why you hear things like say your ABCs or sing happy birthday. So I'm getting some good adequate mechanical action there and dwell time for the hand wash, and then I'm going to rinse it off underneath that water, and now I'm removing that from my hands. That's always best case scenario. And then you'll notice that it follows it up with, in situation where soap and water is not available, then use a hand sanitizer. So it really is a program approach. And, you know, if you watch the news, you might think, and we've certainly been asked, you know, do I need to have a hand sanitizing dispenser in every classroom, every 20 feet? You know, does it need to look like a hospital corridor? And I think our answer would be no, it probably does not need to do that. Okay, that's probably a little bit of overkill, but really just a good program that makes sure I've got a good hand wash. And then when that's not available, that I'm supplementing it with some kind of a hand sanitizer. And there's different ways to do that. You clearly have wall-mounted dispensers. You might have sanitizer on a sanitizing stand, you know, in a lobby or an entrance. And then you can get pump bottles or something as well. So really just a good comprehensive approach, I think, is really the best answer to that.
Okay, thank you. I know hand washing, we all grew up and we all think we know how to do it. And you pump some soap on, rub your hands real quick, wash them, or maybe you just dip them under the cold water. And now that COVID-19 is here, all of a sudden I find myself doing the tops of my hands and my thumb and in between my fingers, maybe trying to get under my fingernails. Are these practices that we should reteach our students and staff and go over proper hand washing technique? And then also emphasizing that sanitizer should not be the first line of defense. It's really a companion to regular hand washing.
Yeah, I would say yes to both those. You know, it's real easy to, you know, want to feel like we're all scrubbing in. You know, we've all got to, you know, do some kind of medical pre-surgery deal when we're washing our hands. There's great resources that can show you how to wash your hands, and you go, oh my gosh, do I really need to show people how to wash their hands? Yeah, you'd be surprised. You know, the data will show you that a lot of times people, they hit the soap. You know, I give a quick one of these, and bam, you know, 2 seconds later, I'm grabbing some paper towel, or I'm putting my hands underneath the dryer. So it is that 20-second time frame is really important. So the more that your program includes some kind of education and awareness to remind people about that, I think that's really important. And then you'll see different techniques that are recommended. CDC has a technique, the WHO has a technique, but you're really just wanting to make sure you are covering the whole hands. And you did a great job imitating it there, but the backs of your hands, between your fingers, you know, you'll see people take their fingertips and get them in the palms of their hands, because they'll think about all the things that we're touching in today's day and age, you know, your phone, your keyboard, and how often are those things getting cleaned or sanitized. So technique is important. The soap and water is important. And, you know, Scott Mag earlier mentioned dwell time a lot when he was talking about disinfectant. So when it comes to sanitizer, that dwell time is important. And so, again, if you're a school or a university, you might be hit with needing to purchase things that maybe you haven't purchased, or purchased in a quantity that is far exceeding what you've done in the past. It's important to understand that output is critical in a hand wash or a hand sanitizer. And so if I have a dispenser or a pump that gives me a very small amount of product, the key is with a sanitizer, I've got to keep that alcohol sanitizer on the surface for that full 20 seconds. So if I just hit my hand and I only rub my palms, well, then guess what? I didn't get the backs of my hands. Or if I hit it really quick and it's such a small output that I can't cover my hands, or I can't keep them, you know, wet or covered with that sanitizer, that I'm really not getting the benefit of doing the act of sanitizing my hands.
Okay, thank you. So what is the FDA's guidance regarding the manufacture of hand sanitizers?
Well, that's a good question. There's a normal guideline, and then there's a pandemic guidelines. I think most people are probably curious with what are they saying right now, and they have relaxed the standard. I think in a normal time, and we've mentioned sort of the healthcare approach to cleaning, and I know we're not talking to necessarily a 100% hospital or healthcare facilities right now, but if you've got a product that can be used in an acute healthcare setting, that's probably a good one to look at, whether it's disinfecting or hand hygiene. So I would steer away from things such as bulk fill soap. Bulk fill is never recommended because it can't maintain a sanitary environment. So that would be something that you'd want to meet the guideline with. I think the other thing to watch out for would be the current guideline. And you mentioned people that are, making hand sanitizer right now. You've probably heard about a brewery, or a distillery or somebody in your market that, has drove over and put some hand sanitizer in a keg at the hospital. And so what those folks are doing is using a temporary formula or recipe that has been suggested by WHO and approved by the FDA. And it's really it's a high alcohol content, which is certainly effective at killing enveloped viruses, as Scott Mag talked about earlier. But the challenge with that is that formula or that recipe does not allow you to add any kind of a thickening agent to make it a gel, or a foaming agent to make it a foam, or an aerosol. And so if you're buying something because you're getting a great deal on it, right? I mean, everybody and their brother right now wants to start a hand hygiene company. So if you're buying something that you're getting a great deal on that is made with that recipe, understand it's going to be very watery. It's going to tend to want to run off your hands. And you've heard people say, oh my gosh, that smells like jet fuel. Oh my, wow, this smells like tequila. And so a lot of it is because there's a shortage of USP grade alcohol, which in a normal scenario would be the grade of alcohol that someone would use. And so FDA has lessened that, and you will hear people talk about using a tech grade alcohol to make hand sanitizer. So if people are going to be doing more frequent hand washing and hand sanitizing, I would say, watch out for a formula that isn't really tried and true, because you're going to tend to dry hands out because you can't really add in much of a moisturizing package. And so if you're doing a lot more hand hygiene, then you get susceptible to contact dermatitis or dry, cracked skin, which may not be a problem right now with the humidity around the country, but I think this is going to go on well into the winter. And so your first line of defense is a good, healthy skin. And so you want to use a formula that is not going to degrade your skin. And I think if you buy something that would be prudent in a time other than a pandemic, that's probably the line of course that I would recommend during this, and they're certainly still available.
Okay. So question number 3, and you kind of hit on some of that already, but what are some issues and concerns with different types of hand sanitizer currently on the market? Alcohol versus non-alcohol, the different types of alcohol being used, things like that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. If you've got a large school population as part of this, then I think they're going to get the alcohol versus non-alcohol question, because typically in the past, schools, whether it's because of the effectiveness of DARE campaigns or the challenges of a kid potentially wanting to ingest alcohol, there's been a lot of non-alcohol that's used in educational markets. And so keep in mind that when CDC puts guidance out, it's kind of a broad, they're painting with a broad brush. They can't put a page on the website for every type of facility or every unique scenario that somebody might have. So if you need an alcohol alternative, then I would defer a little bit to what Scott Mag talked about earlier when they were talking about efficacy data and killing various organisms. So there are so many active ingredients that can be used in a non-alcohol sanitizer. It's hard for them to catalog and keep track of all those. So you'd want to get one, somebody's talking to you about it, and you have that requirement that has got good efficacy data. And again, that if you don't know that lingo, it's an organisms that they're effective against type sheet that would show, all right, here's adenovirus. Scott was throwing all those, him and his double science degree there, all those organisms out, but get documentation that says this product has been tested. Typically, it's going to be a group of gram-positive and gram-negative organisms to make sure that it's got a good broad spectrum effectiveness. And so if you need to go that route, then go there. There's certainly some effective things like a benzalkonium chloride active ingredient and others, but there are good alternatives out there.
Okay.
And then to get to your types of alcohol question, I did mention that a second ago, but normally you'd want to use a USP grade. The alcohol that is most commonly used in most healthcare sanitizers is ethanol. There are other types of alcohol out there. I would say be careful about things like a methanol. If something was put out, if you read the temporary guidance by FDA, The challenge with some of those lower grade alcohols is that you will get a higher than normal aldehyde content in it. And aldehyde in unsafe levels is toxic and can be carcinogenic. And so when you start to shortcut the process, and when it's a pandemic, man, it's all hands on deck, and you loosen guidelines, and that's better than using nothing. Certainly, no question. But you absolutely should try to do best practice and stick with that as much as possible. And so hopefully that answers that alcohol question as well.
Yes, no, you hit on the methyl alcohol. That's where I was kind of targeting.
Okay.
Because I've seen some recent guidance related to it, and it's it's if ingested or absorbed in the hands by these little kids, it could be toxic.
Yeah, that's right.
So for the sake of time, because I know we told our viewers we would open up questions around 11, I've got one more question on hand sanitizing, and that's basically if we had to strategically place hand sanitizing dispensers, what would be your recommendation? I would think you would want one at the entrance to the building so that people kill that bacteria off their hands prior to coming in, if you don't typically have running water and soap at the entrance of a building.
Yes, absolutely. Again, I'm going to first tell you what I don't think you need to do, which is put one on every wall and every corner and 20 feet apart. So, but if you look at the diagram that hopefully everybody can see, and this is a school. If you're a university, you might have 300 buildings on your campus, right? So, but think logically around those choke points. Where do people come in, right? Where's the traffic flow? And you'll see here on the right, you can see that main entrance. So a lot of times there's a location where either foot traffic or buses are letting out, and that's how people enter the building. Great place to have hand sanitizer on a stand. You get it before it even gets inside the facility. You'll notice in this particular kind of diagram, you'll see like the front office. Think about that administrative office where everybody's in and out of there. And then I think another key area is your cafeteria, right? What I want to avoid is the typical routes of entry, which is your T's, your forehead, and then coming down the center of your face. So touching your eyes, touching your nose, touching your mouth. And so before I get ready to eat, if I can't get the kids to wash with soap and water, that's a great location to have hand sanitizer before I start picking up French fries and stuffing them in my mouth. So, and then again, try to get them before they go home. If that same egress area has got a sanitizing dispenser, now you're getting them in and out. So be smart about it. Some places might not be able to use a stand, but again, that's why I mentioned some type of a pump bottle as well, because those can be moved around. And I'm here to tell you your best plan when you open, you're going to say, oh my gosh, we didn't think about X or Z. And so something that's mobile, something that's flexible, I think is really a good alternative. And once you mount a dispenser on a wall, you're going to have a tough time moving that around if you need to. So I think use common sense, think about traffic flow, where are people congregating, and try to hit those spots.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Now, before we go on to our next session or section, it's going to be reopening support tools. I know we scheduled the presentation till 11, which gives us 7 minutes, but this next session is ultra important. It may be your most important to tackle in your community. And so we will likely go over on this. We also have several questions submitted by our panelists, but I would like to let y'all know we're likely going to go over a little bit so that we can discuss these next 3 questions in depth, just because they are so important during this time. And so basically it's the reopening support tools. And the deal here is, and Troy, I know you'll probably be speaking on some of this, is there's a lot of high anxiety to our employees returning to work, our students that are going to have to come back, our community members that need to go in to take care of business day to day. And so I want this discussion to be, what our responsibilities are to effectively communicate to them in a way that lowers their anxieties, their worries, makes them feel safe about what it is we're doing, to make this transition back into the workforce and into the community easier for those that we represent. With that being said, what can our members do to inform, parents, students, visitors, staff about the steps they're taking to prepare for reopening?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. I appreciate you hosting this today, and I think you hit the nail on the head, right off the bat with the anxiety level, especially when you talk about children, K through 12, middle school, high schoolers. Their lives have been completely disrupted. They were removed from their settings that they were typically used to, and it's on the news. They hear that discussion all the time. And so, to get to those students in the beginning, it certainly is important to target that parent level right off the bat. And so I think early communication is really important. I know that plans aren't finalized yet. There's still a lot of unknowns out there, but getting the things that you can get out early will help kind of build that confidence that there is actions that are being taken, and there is thought being given to making sure that everyone gets into the building safely. And then just, across the how, I don't think you can leave out any form of communication, right? Emails can get ignored. Letters might not make it there. So, you've got phone blasts that you can do. You have your social media sites that everyone has. And in the social media world, there's different levels of that in whether it's a college or a university or a K through 12 type setting, where you might have a district-wide social media site, but many times principals or maybe a college department inside of a university will also have those social media messaging. And to be able to make sure that stays connected and in line, and everyone's putting out the same message through all those different platforms, I think can really make sure that you get the right information in the best possible way.
Sure. And to expand on this, what are your thoughts about our members creating official procedures and letting the community or the students and parents know what it is that those extra steps they have taken to ensure that they're protecting the community and the students? And what I mean by that is I see some entities just saying, we're effectively cleaning and we're wiping down surfaces. And then I see another entity that hands out a 9-page document of, we've retrained all our staff. We've upgraded our chemicals to a medical grade chemical. We're letting our chemicals dwell a minimum of 10 minutes. We're requiring all patrons to wash their hands before entering our building, and we're doing temperature checks. And so they've got a very detailed, thorough plan that's been well thought out. What's your thoughts about giving that to the community or the students and staff to help relieve those tensions and creating something like that?
No, I think that's a great point. And there's a variety of ways to get that information, whether it be through whoever your support system is from a product standpoint that's coming on. What are those manufacturers doing, and what types of training programs are they producing, and what kind of modifications are being recommended? And there is also the CDC guidelines that certainly spell out a lot of those steps that can go through, and local health departments are stepping up and creating those same types of tools. So I think pointing that out and letting people know that what steps are being taken, from whether it's the cleaning practices, adding hand hygiene, the social distancing efforts that are going to be put into place, if that's the case, all those things, certainly informing the public of that, again, help lower that anxiety level.
Wonderful, thank you. This next part, I kind of want you to think about it from a social distancing standpoint. So it's going to get into the types of education and awareness materials. But I know that traditional face-to-face training of custodians on how to apply chemicals, how to use their equipment, is probably not going to be taking place as much as it used to be. And so I've seen a lot of manufacturers where they're implementing online training programs, where there's videos they can watch on how to properly use the chemical. There's PPE trainings. There's all kinds of trainings available. There's printouts where they can post stuff all around their building, like hand washing procedures. And then also like a testing feature where you can say, hey, my custodial staff has watched these videos, they've taken this test, they've passed it, they're competent. And so with that, the question is, what types of education and awareness materials can schools share and display to inform students, staff, visitors regarding CDC recommendations?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think you hit a couple things there. And I think I'd like to start off with, especially from an awareness standpoint, that is a great moment as people are coming into the building, the things that you've been telling them, early on, this is what we're going to be doing. It's a visible display that's immediately conveyed when a student or parent or an outside member of the community comes into a building. When they see the signage, the posters, maybe there's some video playing on the TV, those types of things are right there, and I think helps express and show that it wasn't just words or a document that was put out. That's actually things are in place. To your point, it really starts at that custodian level. When you talk about communication, you have all the different stakeholders that are involved. Whether it's a parent, the child, the staff that's in the school, the teachers who are going to be standing in front of these kids and their concerns that are going on. But you also have, I think, an extra level of attention that should be paid to that custodial staff and make sure that they're getting good communication, good feedback to make sure that they stay completely engaged as a frontline worker in this environment. And certainly training programs are a way to do that, and online certainly gives you that social distancing aspect to that. So if you're looking at training custodians and looking at online systems, I think one, being able to have something that they're watching clearly, but that testing and reporting features that kind of shows and is able to document what level everybody's at. And I would add to that the ability to have some type of survey system that you could go through and evaluate cleanliness throughout a building. That's information that could be posted throughout the facility for staff or even into the community if you'd like, that talks about that could show the results that are being achieved from a cleanliness level throughout a facility.
Thank you. Go ahead.
In that communication, you certainly, the wall charts, the posters, you can see a lot of those examples here. I think TVs throughout schools are very common now. Broadcasts that the students put on, they could certainly hit messaging maybe in the morning before the bell that kind of touches on those types of things as well, to make sure that we're getting the message out there. And then maybe there's placards or decals on the floor. You see that all the time now in the retail stores that maybe help space children out if they're in a cafeteria setting, or if they're lined up to move throughout the school from time to time, if that's part of our life. But little things like that kind of help promote that social distance aspect.
Thank you. I'd like to add on to what you said, and I don't want this to become a marketing piece at all, but I'm just speaking from my previous experience. When I was over custodial staff previously, we used the Buckeye line of products. And I don't know if y'all still offer this or not, but at that time, y'all had like a Buckeye Honors University, and it was free to the people that were already buying your products. And it offered a bunch of posters that I could print out and put in custodial closets and restrooms and entrances to buildings. And there's a lot of support tools there. Is that still something y'all are offering?
Absolutely, it certainly is, and that really goes to that education side of things. Whether it's in a custodial closet that kind of reinforces techniques and procedures, or if it's in a restroom that talks about making sure you wash your hands for 20 seconds, kind of cover the full range for different applications.
And can you tell me, has it already had some updates and stuff for COVID-19? Like, are there readily resources available for that?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. We're revising those programs, making sure that they meet the times that we're we're currently in, and stay as new guidance comes out. We can kind of be adjustable going forward.
Oh, my audio's starting
What
to
we
cut
typically
out.
would have trained in our setting with disinfectants, you can bring that into a classroom setting so that while the product's dwelling, other tasks are being accomplished.
Thank you. My last question is just kind of a wrap-up question. Are there any other measures that our members can take to keep our community informed about how they're preparing to reopen? Is there anything else on this topic I haven't touched on that you think they need to know?
I think one of the things that I've seen out there in a facilities department, I think should be a big part of, is a lot of surveys that have gone out into the community and asking, what are the community members, what's going to make them feel comfortable coming back, and then judging that and seeing what is practical and applicable that you can put in place, both from a parent perspective and a staff perspective. As they're coming back there, I think that's a tool that's been out there, and the more the facilities department's involved with that, I think it would be really helpful. And I think reaching out, I've seen some news articles in our local market, where the media comes out and talks to facilities departments and does, sees the procedures that are being done inside of the school. I think little stories like that can make a big difference in helping people feel comfortable.
That's actually an excellent idea. I didn't really think about it, but I know that several of our members during Hurricane Harvey utilized those small stories when updating the community what they were doing to recover and protect them and keep them safe. And those news articles went a long way to help them. Well, guys, we're at the end of our session. I'd like to open it up one last time to all three of you. If there's anything that I failed to mention that you would like to add before we move on to the question and answer part. No, we're good? Okay. Good deal. Well, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie and Jeff. I think Jeff's going to go over some of our contact information that's displayed right now, and then we'll go into the questions.
Yeah, and briefly, I just want to remind you, attendees, if you're on right now, you will receive a survey link soon that will allow you to signify whether or not you would like CEU credit. So that option will be available to you, and we will send the survey to everyone. We do want your feedback on today's presentation. Thank you to both Scotts and Troy and Stephen for moderating, and the panelists for providing such helpful information. Jeff, I'm going to hand it over to you. We've been having a little bit of technical difficulties, but I think we're all good. Jeff?
Okay, sorry about that. I am here. Yeah, we've been going on a text string and going crazy. But anyway, I want to say I learned a ton. We're all sitting home watching a lot of TV. So from one of my other TV shows I watch all the time, the guy goes, "Was that a great road trip or what?" As he looks up from his 69 Camaro, that diners, drive-ins, and dives. One of my favorite shows. But so I think that was a pretty good road trip as far as just learning and listening. Some of you guys, ladies, folks out there may have already known a lot of the material. I think it was tremendously informational to me. And I want to thank our experts, subject matter experts. They were sanitizing when sanitizing wasn't necessarily cool. I'll say that again. I mean, they've been doing this for a long time and been entrenched and very, very good at it. I wanted to go through, if there are further questions. I want to say, obviously, we love the Buckeye guys. They helped us with the presentation. If there are any questions in your facility, reach out. Now, obviously, these gentlemen's contact information is here. There's also one additional at the bottom, Rob Rosenwinkel. He's over their marketing department. He helped us with a lot of work in preparing this. Scott and Troy, as you saw in their bios, are all very, very knowledgeable. If if they, probably all you folks know how to contact either your independent or your Buckeye Cleaning Center in your area, whichever state or area you may be in. I wanted to kind of go over to our group with the Choice Partners and HCDE. You see my contact. Joanne is our assistant director. She's over all of the contracts that are not food. She's been looking at questions. She did a tremendous amount of work with preparing the presentation. And if you see that phone number down below, that 800 number, a lot of the times that is going to ring to her phone. And if you've called anywhere from about 7 a.m. to about 10 p.m., you'll probably get Joanne. She may be in the office, she may be on a horse, and she can probably answer all your questions, including your website related questions, just from memory, and tell you to click the button up the right and then go down to the third button over to the left and help you with any questions you may have regarding Choice Partners, any information you want from us also. Christy Nichols, what's that?
Although we don't recommend that calling at 10 p.m. time, right? Because Joanne needs a little downtime too.
Well, that's Joanne goes to bed early. Yeah. I remember one of her stories. She's like, yeah, the sun goes down and we're in bed. And I'm like, well, okay. I'm just starting to watch all my dumb shows. But anyway.
Joanne's usually loyal, but I don't recommend that 10 p.m. time.
Yeah, okay, let's go 7 p.m. The one other person, obviously you've got Steven's information there with his HCDE email. Christy is a contract manager handling Buckeye and a lot of the folks in this space. And then you've heard Stephanie's voice a couple of times. She's the director of client engagement. She introduced herself briefly at the beginning. And also the assistant director, Janet Walks. Janet's been working with all of us, instrumental discussions, planning, helping us get this all together and organize and plan and carry it off. I think everybody did a tremendous job. I just want to encourage, these are crazy times we're in. I want to encourage anyone, and obviously we want to encourage you. We've got all our Buckeye friends here, but whoever you deal with, get the information, get it documented, understand what's required, understand what you need to be safe in your return. Do your due diligence. Obviously, in the litigious society we're in, everybody's scared of everything. So do your research, take care of things. I think these guys have all had tremendous answers. I think it was a tremendous list of questions that Stephen covered, and so I guess with that, there's a couple of things we will talk about. We'll talk about the survey and any internal questions that might have come through. I don't see any questions. Is that Joanne?
Yeah, Joanne will have those questions, and if she can ask those questions, any of the panelists will be able to answer them. Just speak up if you have the answer to that. We are gonna go ahead and jump into the question section. Unless you have anything else, Jeff, or are you good?
No, I just want to say thank you all for attending. We had to go, Stephen. Stephen's raising his hand.
Yeah, I was raising my hand. I don't want to interrupt, but I do want to mention that the survey was just posted in the chat box, but the bottom part of that link, for whatever reason, is not clickable. So you'll need to scroll up to the top where the link is blue and click it to be able to access that survey.
Thank you, Stephen. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah.
No, that's good information. And I hadn't really, I see that, yes.
Yes, it's in there. I just wanted people to make sure they can find it because it doesn't look like it's clickable.
Yeah, very, very good point. Okay, good. All right, I'm gonna let everyone, and on these surveys, please, we want brutally honest feedback. It's the only way anyone gets better. You know, did we not cover what you wanted to cover? Did we spend too much time on something with just, you know, good, bad, or indifferent? Obviously, everybody wants you to say, oh, that was great and all that. But bottom line is we want to know how we can get better, and honest feedback will help us. So please fill out the survey, and specifically if you need the CEUs, but we would love to have everyone attending fill out the survey just so we know what people are thinking or what they thought about the presentation. I think I'm going to leave it here, and I believe there were some internal questions. I don't have
Yes.
access to those, so I'm gonna fade off and let Stephen and the others and the panelists answer those questions.
Thanks, Jeff. A reminder, this is going to be posted on the Choice Partners website, but Joanne, you can go ahead and get started with the questions.
Okie dokie. One of the questions is, in today's budgets, we have large quantities of Clorox, Lysol, and 409 on supply. Do we need to buy other products, or are these effective, and can they be used in schools?
Yes, they have effectivity against many bacteria and viruses. The thing I would encourage the end user to do is to make sure we pay attention to the percent active of the sodium hypochlorite, the bleach, or whatever it is that they're using. Make sure that the activity is high enough. Go to the website of the manufacturer and make sure that they're using it at the proper rate to ensure that they're getting disinfection. Bleach is something that you have to be careful with. We've all smelled bleach. We know what the effects of bleach can be. So obviously in schools, we want to make sure that bleach doesn't get mixed with other chemicals. You start mixing chemicals, you create a hazardous situation that could result in your injury, or every once in a while even death. So they just need to be important, just need to make sure they pay attention to the manufacturer's recommendations.
Okay, Scott, this may be kind of on the same lines, but for cafeteria kitchens using sanitizing solutions made up of bleach and water to 100 ppm, what is the estimated kill time for envelope viruses, and what level of protection do you believe it will leave after a surface has been wiped down, if any?
Well, because the COVID-19 or the SARS-CoV-2 virus is an envelope virus, we know that it's surrounded by a very weak lipid layer. That bleach will deactivate that virus given time. Now, that goes back to what there was a very critical piece. They said 100 ppm. So you have to look at the website for the manufacturer of the bleach to make sure that your dilution is proper, to make sure that you get the ppm. And if you're using bleach, it's always a wise idea not to leave that mixed up solution any longer than a day, because bleach becomes inactive very quickly. It's very unstable, and that's what makes bleach a good, solid sanitizing solution. The question of what's left behind, since we don't live in a vacuum, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, there are bacteria, funguses, viruses everywhere. That material that's left behind on the counter or table or chair is not going to have that activity left behind. We call that an antimicrobial residual activity, and there will be none there from that solution.
Okie doke, thank you. I have one here for washing your hands. Is it better to use warm water rather than cold?
Most of the guidelines just say sort of tepid. So I don't know that I have seen studies that talk about extreme water temperature one way or the other. The one thing I would caution you on, normally anything that talks about water temperature, is to make sure that it's not too hot, because too hot will damage your skin, obviously. But it's not a requirement that you use hot or warm water. I know some buildings might not have access to warm water, but typically just normal tap water is adequate to do that.
Perfect, okay. And then in your restrooms, speaking of the touchless hand dryers in the restroom, how sanitary are those machines? I've noticed that the water splashes off the hands onto the surface of those machines.
Yeah, I can take that one, I guess. There certainly are studies that talk about what's happening to the bacteria that might be present in a restroom when a hand dryer goes off and kind of blowing around the facility, around the room. They do sometimes you'll see the added filters and whatnot to try to minimize that. But it's certainly one of the things to consider. You're weighing all the different considerations out there. Certain, whether it's hand dryer, or maybe you're going to a touchless towel dispenser or something along those lines after you wash your hands. Certainly that's a preferred method. Yes, Stephen?
Steve?
And Troy, on these hand dryers, a lot of times we take the mindset of set and forget, but don't a lot of these actually have filtration systems that need to be maintained in them?
Yeah, you certainly would want to look at the manufacturer of that and kind of look at what their the maintenance procedures would be, because there's it is not something that just gets installed and then you never look at it again. I'm sure we've all seen those in the random restroom in a convenience store somewhere that looks like it wasn't touched in the past 20 years that it was up. But so yeah, whether it's changing the filters or making that part of your restroom procedures that those get wiped down and cleaned is certainly another element.
Okie doke. And another one, is there somewhere where you can state the safe ingredients for hand sanitizers for any size of individual, all the way from small to large?
If I understand the question right, if they're looking for ingredients, and Scott Mag might have an additional resource for you, but that FDA guideline, even the temporary one that was put out, lists the different types of alcohols, for example, that can be used and what ingredients are allowed to be used underneath that temporary WHO formula. So hopefully that's a question that they're looking for. But Scott, I don't know if anybody's asked you anything similar, if you'd have another thought on that.
The problem that we're running into, and Stephen mentioned this earlier, some of the hand sanitizers that are being sold under that World Health Organization formula have the methanol in them. And unfortunately, because they're quick to enter the market, we don't necessarily have all the data that we need to have on those particular formulas. So you're not going to find them listing methanol on their SDS sheet, or their safety data sheet, which is where you would find the traditional list of materials. So I think Scott brought up a good point that if you're looking to buy a hand sanitizer for your facility, I think the best thing you should do is go in and research the manufacturer of that sanitizer that you're looking for. If it's a company that was registered with the FDA, then you're going to find a company that produces a product that is high quality and you won't have the potential bad health effects. If you can't find them on the FDA website, or they don't mention on their website that they're an FDA facility, then you probably ought to take caution as far as using that particular product.
And I will say, I want to say it was yesterday in the news I saw, and I don't know if it was the CDC or the FDA, but somebody updated a list of non-recommended hand sanitizers. There was like 9 on there that had that methyl alcohol in it at concentrations they felt were unacceptable.
And that was the FDA, Stephen, you're correct.
Okay. I'm seeing so much information from so many places, I couldn't remember.
Okay, and do you have a suggestion for vendor delivery best practices?
Did we lose audio?
No.
No,
Yes.
Anybody want that one?
Yeah, it's facilities can vary so dramatically. It's kind of a difficult to paint on too broad of a brush, but you certainly can look to limit the contact points. So whether that's maybe a vendor typically would make a delivery and actually have someone sign for it and exchange paperwork right then, maybe that becomes an electronic process and the product just gets dropped off at the door. That would be certainly be an option. Providing the opportunity for hand hygiene of some sort at the point of entry where vendors might come in would be another avenue to look at to try to keep everyone as safe as possible. And then depending on the locality, you certainly have your face covering options that you might want to implement as part of a requirements when vendors are making deliveries. Do you guys have anything else that you would think of?
I know on the outside of our building, on each door, we've taken the time to put a sign up that makes people at least stop and think that if you feel like you've had some sort of a respiratory illness, don't come in. We ask you to kindly stay outside, give us a call, and we'll be happy to take care of whatever they need. But it's just something that makes them think before they enter your building.
Good point.
Okay,
I'll,
Very good.
I'll throw this in additionally, and it's just because I'm all over the building right now and I noticed it. But one of the things that we did, you might imagine, as a manufacturer, we get an enormous amount of deliveries in here for material. And so normally, if you're in here and somebody needs to use the restroom, we're pretty open to letting them do that. But we really restricted what part of the building any outside delivery can get into. And Scott had portable washrooms put outside our building. And so if somebody needs to access something like that, they're actually doing it outside the facility. They're not wandering around the facility to use the bathroom. And I think a lot of times people are so open and say, oh yeah, the bathroom's down here. And so to me, I thought that was really effective, something that we did on the operations side.
Very good. Do you have a sheet of helpful links that we could possibly have to go with this presentation? That would be a Buckeye question. For everything that you've kind of referenced and referred to, is there any kind of a sheet that you have that we can put with the presentation?
Yeah, I think it'd be easy for us to maybe collaborate, and we'll send something to you guys. It would be, sort of maybe a comprehensive list of some sites that would be key to check out information.
Okay, perfect. I only have one little comment to go with another little question, and it's about the printout of the information on this presentation. This presentation will be available on the Choice Partners website. It will be under About Us, go down to Presentations, and in that it will be on the COVID-19 and how to cope with it. So it'll be posted there. As soon as we get the YouTube link to this finished, which probably takes about 2 days, we'll also post that there. The presentation will be there, and any helpful links that we have for you will also be posted there. So with that being said, Stephanie, I think I can hand it back to you. I don't believe I have, well, let me check one more. I might have had another one.
Can I throw in a question?
Oh, I have a question. Are electrostatic sprayers effective in the classroom or on buses, or should other methods be used?
Well, that goes back to a similar question from fogging and that sort of thing. Electrostatic sprayers create a very fine atomized mist. So if you were talking to someone from the EPA would certainly suggest that they do not endorse the use of any disinfectant through an electrostatic sprayer. Now, I've had a lot of questions regarding these type of sprayers and the use of disinfectants. My main point is to always make sure that the end user in the end accomplishes what the label direction says on the disinfectant. We have to make sure that the surface is thoroughly wetted out, thoroughly covered, and wet long enough to meet the dwell time. So, we can argue about applications and we can say whether the EPA endorses it or doesn't endorse it, but there's a lot of money been spent on these type of hardware systems, and the expectation is they're going to go ahead and use a disinfectant through it. What we have to help the end user understand is that you have to keep it wet, you have to keep it thoroughly wet, and wet long enough to kill the virus or bacteria that you're looking for.
Okay, I have one follow-up for Scott Mag. You referred to bulk soap in restrooms. Could you please clarify what that means?
Yeah, I should let Scott Mag answer that. So I'm actually the guilty party there. But so when I say a bulk fill soap, I mean a refillable dispenser. So one that does not have a hermetically sealed cartridge, whether that's flexible or rigid. There's different variety of those. But a lot of times you will see somebody that has you may have seen like a stainless steel, Bobrick is a company that makes some dispenser on a wall. And then there's a compartment you have to open, and then you typically have a gallon or some kind of cartridge that you're topping off, or you're refilling that bulk fill dispenser. And so the challenge there is that the manufacturer's guidelines will all tell you that before you top that off, you've got to empty that dispenser, remove it, clean it, and in practicality, that doesn't happen. So what ends up happening is you end up with unsafe levels of bacteria inside the actual dispenser, and that's completely counterproductive to wanting to maintain good hand hygiene, because now I'm putting Dr. Gerber at the University of Arizona did a study, and it was about 25% of the bulk fill dispensers had some kind of an unsafe level of bacteria in them. So that's why you'll, and again, we went back to healthcare, but you'll never see a bulk fill dispenser in a hospital because it's not sanitary enough. And if the idea is for us to have a good hygienic program, then you don't want any kind of a refillable dispenser.
And I'd like to add on to that, and I'm sure that Scott didn't want to mention this, but a lot of times those refillable dispensers, they're not locked, and so the public or a student can open it and slip anything they want to into it. I mean, they fill it up with water, they can throw in a dirty glove or a dirty napkin. I mean, I won't say what I found in them, but I've seen my fair share of things I didn't want to see. I did have one question I wanted to ask, if Joanne, if that's all of them.
No, well, I have one more. I must have missed
Okay.
it. Have you encountered any standard operating procedure samples for schools and or signage for kitchens regarding the COVID-19? Anybody run across any of that yet?
I have not. I'm sure we can come across something though.
Okie
What was the
dokie.
question? I missed part of it. Cut out.
Oh, have you encountered any SOP samples for schools and or signage for kitchens regarding the COVID-19?
Okay. And my question kind of goes along with that. So knowing that we have viewers on here that handle food and work in cafeterias and things of that nature, all the recommendations and guidances that we've talked about regarding disinfectants and sanitizers, do those recommendations change at all for food prep areas and areas where food is handled?
Well, the actual process of disinfecting or sanitizing does not change. What we have to make sure we pay attention to, though, since we're handling food, there's two different locations. One is the area where we know food is going to be in contact with that surface. It's the food prep area. Those food prep areas are very specific to the type of disinfectant or sanitizer that you're using. Generally, we look to the National Sanitary Foundation, which you'll see their emblem is an NSF with a check on it on the label. And that helps an end user know that that product is approved for those food prep areas. In other locations, for instance, tables where maybe you don't necessarily know that the food is going to end up there, but in a kitchen with a bunch of small children, you're probably going to have food end up on that table. So in those cases, I think it's always good to err on the side of caution and wipe it down with a wet rag, just with water at the end after you've allowed the disinfectant to take its time to dry.
So let me follow up with that. And really, you just triggered this question. But a lot of school districts are entertaining plans of letting kids eat in the classroom instead of the cafeteria, or the classroom, the hallways, the cafeteria, for social distancing purposes. So I know, like, when using a quaternary product, there's a lot of times that it leaves like a residue sometimes on children's desks. Is there something that we should be doing different, knowing that now may become their lunch area?
I think that's a solid point, Stephen. There's no question that a quaternary ammonium chloride will leave behind what is referred to as the quat salt. And that is the product that's actually doing the job of killing the bacteria or the virus. That's not something that residue is at such a small level. I don't believe that on a one-time occurrence, you would have a situation where it could impact anyone. But I do believe that we need to, in the process of wiping down these desks with the disinfectant every once in a while, and let's say in the course of a school district's time, let's say once a week, we take just water after we've disinfected and wipe down the desk that student has been using every day since they started back to school, to make sure that we don't get an unsafe level of a residue left behind. And once again, how long does it take to develop? Well, how much material is someone putting on the surface? Whatever that means from a standpoint of how often you're doing it and how much solution you're leaving behind will kind of dictate how much residue will end up on that desk.
All right.
All right.
Is that all we got, Joanne?
Well, I have one answer to one little question that they may not have been able to answer, and it was on the SOPs for the cafeteria. That can be reached at the Institute of Child Nutrition. So Institute of Child Nutrition has a few of those sample posters for you to put in your kitchen. And I believe with that, we've answered most all of them.
Wonderful.
All right, awesome. I have good news here. Those of you who need CEU credit, you'll have 2 hours of CEU credit once you fill out the survey that is provided in the chat area. Please take some time right now, if you haven't done so already, to fill out the survey. It's very brief, super simple, but that will let us know how to get you your CEU credit, your 2 hours CEU credit. If you have any questions, here's the contact information again, posted right in front of you. These are email addresses where you can connect with us. We will have everything posted on the Choice Partners website at www.choicepartners.org. With that, again, look at your survey, fill out the survey, and we'd love to get you your CEU credit. Thank you to Buckeye for standing in with us and having this discussion regarding COVID cleanup. And with that, unless there's anything else that, Jeff, if you have anything at the moment, this is your time. Other than that, we'll be closing out in the next couple of minutes.
Stephanie, I'd like to just remind them how to access that survey one last time, and it's in the chat box, but not the whole link is clickable, so they may have to scroll up a little bit to get to that blue clickable link in order to access it.
I fixed it. They have one that doesn't have that.
Do what?
I said I fixed it. They can scroll down to the next one, and it's all right there.
Perfect.
Your feedback is important to us. It helps us improve any areas that need improvement. But we thank everybody for being on this call or this webinar with us. Jeff, you're on.
Okay, I'm on. I don't need to put my face on there. Y'all can remember what I look like. You can hear my volume. But no, I just think it was great. Stephen did a tremendous job moderating and asking the right questions, and also following up with and injecting good feedback, and just you guys, the panelists, subject matter experts, it goes without saying, you guys knew what's going on, and the main thing is we want people to be safe. We want them to utilize their resources and return in a safe manner. I mean, it's kind of it's a very strange time right now, and these are all highly charged questions, answers, and health-related issues that need to be addressed. And I hope for all the attendees that you guys really have some good takeaways. Hopefully, we'll have a few more resources out to you, and this presentation will be linkable also on a YouTube channel, so you can go back and look at it and possibly review questions and answers that were posted during the panelist discussion also. I think with that, I think we're good, unless anyone has anything else to add. I want to say thanks to all of our client engagement, all of our Choice Partners folks that helped put this together. It looks kind of easy on the front side with the four rock stars up here on the panel, but there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that went on with a lot of the people that had their contacts on there and that were mentioned. So it was a collaborative effort, and I think it was pulled off well, and a lot of those other folks did a very, very good job. So I think with that, I think we are good to go, and thank you very much for your time, gentlemen, for taking a couple of hours to answer questions.
Thanks for having us.
Welcome.
Yes.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Thank you,
Well,
guys.
everyone have a great day. We're going to go ahead and sign off now. Thank you all once again.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stephanie.